John Martin and James Taylor. It's amazing to say these songs from when I was younger. No, that's not right. And we're blessed with some absolutely amazing guitars. I've got this, I managed to acquire, I won't go into details, I managed to get a hold of this guitar, an Irish company called Loudon. And it is just the most amazing machine, truly amazing. I don't know how good the sound is, but the resonance on the strings.
It sounds pretty good.
Just goes on and on. I mean, it's just... Okay, how are we doing?
Excellent. I think that's 7 o'clock, and I can't tell how many people are here, but I'm presuming, Victoria, we've got.
We're at 35, so I'll keep letting people in.
Right. Okay. I'll maybe just give it a moment or two then, if we're still letting people in. Welcome to those that have joined us so far. I'm just wondering, Gerard, if you've got 30 seconds of any Valerie and the Week of Wonders, or is that digging?
Well, given that it was a kind of a, what could you say, post-punk, quite a kind of hard-hitting outfit. Most of the stuff was quite saturated, heavy guitar, but there's a couple. Happy the Man. Anyway, Valerie and the Week of Wonders, that's a conversation for later.
Yeah, anyway, that was an unexpected treat. Thank you, Gerard. I think we'll crack on. We're just after 7 o'clock. Thank you all for joining. For those that don't know me, perhaps, my name's Gordon Wilson. I'm the Managing Director of Carbon, and it's a pleasure to have Gerard Burns here with us this evening. And you know, we've had a really positive response, so delighted you could join us. And also it's great that nobody's having to battle the icy conditions out there. Before I introduce Gerard properly, there are just a few housekeeping points that I'll run through. We've got a couple of hours, and we've got a bit of chat, and we've got some videos, and we've got some images, so we've got quite a lot to go through. Given that's the case, we're going to have a formal break at 7:50, and we'll play a video of Gerard's gallery and studio, so you can stretch your legs, refill your glasses, and have a look at a video between about 7:50 and 8, depending on how the conversation goes. There's a function called Speaker View in your top right-hand corner of your screen. If you want to just see Gerard and the images as big as you can, then please use Speaker View. That's going to help. We have you all on mute, just so we don't end up with you as the main picture by accident if you cough or sneeze or anything like that. So I hope you don't mind. To ask questions, at the foot of your screen, there's something called chat. So if you want to pose a question, please put it on chat, and we'll try and answer them as best we can as we go through the evening. There's also something called reactions. So we might ask some kind of a question. If we do that, please use reactions. We can interact that way as well. Right, I think that's it. Thank you. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce Gerard Burns. Gerard's probably best known for his extraordinary portraits, but he also had a dalliance in the 80s with a musical career, and we'll hear a bit about that later as well. His work, of course, extends beyond portraits into streetscapes, forest scenes, and most recently sculpting. And if we have time, we'll touch on all of these things. And for me, certainly, Gerard embodies creativity, and he's constantly developing and trying new things. Before we've done an in-person event, but this is completely new for us. So please bear with us, be patient. You know, there might be a glitch or two, but we'll be doing our best. You know, I'll talk not very much after this, and we'll get to hear the important stuff. So yeah, get comfortable, have a drink, and we'll move on. So I spent the weekend reading Gerard's new book, and if you haven't seen it, it's well worth getting it. It's a beautiful book of his life and his work, and there were two sentences. Oh, well prepared. There it is.
Well prepared. Yep.
There were two sentences at the end of chapter 1, which I thought were especially impactful. So that's where I'm going to start, and I'll quote straight from the book. Today, Gerard Burns has 3 paintings hanging in the National Portrait Gallery in Edinburgh. Not bad for a boy from Cumbernauld whose tutors couldn't see any future in his unfashionable brand of Scottish realism. So Gerard, perhaps you can give us a bit of the backstory and talk about some of the obstacles and challenges you've had along the way.
Okay, I suppose the biggest single challenge was in terms of self-belief. If you're a boy from Cumbernauld, I had no role models as such. My father was an engineer. He went on into further ed. My mum basically looked after the house, and she worked at the secretarial work. I had an older cousin who went to art school, but other than that, there was no one that I could ever go to who would say, okay, this is what you do, try this first. So before even art school, I went to do engineering. I went to do engineering at Strathclyde, which is just a disaster. That's the point where you realise, where I realised that there are different brains. And I was a bright kid. You know, I got really good grades and was advised to go and do, and it was just a disaster. So at that point, you could get a thing called a repeat year grant, believe it or not. So outrageous, you know, at the age of 17, you were allowed to make a mistake, and you could kind of start again. So without telling my parents, I applied to art school because I just thought, you know, there's no way. What does it mean? It's basically 4 years of doing what I'd always dreamed of doing. But and I think it really upset my dad, actually, you know, because I was accepted without really having run it past him. And of course, once I actually brought it up, their attitude was, well, for God's sake, if you want to go to art school, you know, go to art school, you know. Got to Glasgow School of Art, which was really, it was an amazing experience. Just the fact of having been accepted. And the first 2 years were wonderful. Great friends, loads of energy. And then I think probably the push in Glasgow School of Art at that time was much more towards a sort of abstract landscape-based expressionist work. You had people like Peter Howson ultimately, and you had people like Ken Curry who were further up the school, who were kind of pushing ahead with their form of realism, which to me was still almost, it verged almost upon caricature. It was a distortion, and really all I wanted to do was to reinterpret, to look at the world around me, and to reinterpret that in paint the way the old masters did. And there just was no space for it in the art school at that time. So I received no encouragement whatsoever. None. The tutors were, at best, they were something you tolerated, but it wasn't a good. So by the time I got to third year, they had beat me, basically. And I finished my time at art school working with sand in a totally abstract way, completely abstract. I played the game, in other words, but in doing so, it knocked it out of me. And when I came out of art school, I mean, it's almost inconceivable for a boy who defined himself, you know, through making marks on paper. I literally for 2 years, I never made a mark on paper. And what I did was I threw myself into music. And I decided that would be the route. And I let go of the art completely, totally and completely. And it wasn't until I then applied to do teachers training. And I can really remember clearly that first moment when I went into a classroom and picked up a brush and did that thing, made that mark on paper, and it was like a bomb going off in my head. And I thought, why haven't I been doing this? You know, this, whatever that endorphin, whatever that thing is. And basically that set me on the route again. And I started making children's book illustrations. And I've got very close to getting a couple of these books published. Maybe will still, a couple of good things. And that was my route back in. I began to make marks on paper. And went from a fairly low base point to producing some, looking back on them, incredible paintings. The first venture into oil took me to paintings like Anthem. I mean, all of these, people can see them all on the website. They're all in the book. And as I say, went from zero to really quite a high level over the course of maybe 3 or 4 years.
And taking you back to art school, I mean, it was tough, wasn't it? I think, I mean, you couldn't afford paint at the time. I think, is that what drove you to using sand and other materials?
And it was, and it's only in retrospect that you realise these things. You know, it's like enrolling for music school and not having a piano to play on, and them just assuming that you've got a piano to play on, or just assuming, I mean, I certainly wasn't in the worst position. I mean, I know there were loads of people in a much worse position than me, but you had a grant, and I suppose a bit of pride. I tried my best to live off my grant. I was staying at home. My parents provided a really secure environment for me. There was food, there was clothes, but I tried my best. But really looking back on it, there was just no money for paint. So I spent my time working with charcoal, with pencils, with borrowed bits of paper, whatever I could get my hands on. And actually, ultimately, the sand, I remember there was a building site down at the bottom of Hill Street, and I would go and basically get buckets of this stuff. And you could get PVA glue from the store downstairs. And essentially that was the way that I made it work, was just almost Robert Rauschenberg-esque, where you're making artworks from found materials, you know.
And disillusioned, you went to work, I think, in the old house, and that's where you were trying to kick off your music career. I think we might have a video we can play, which is pretty impressive from those days. So right. I might give Victoria a little bit of time to try and to get that up. But Valerie and the Week of Wonders was the band where you nearly clinched a record deal. Where did that name come from?
Oh, gosh. Again, these things, you know, at the time, it was tough. We found it hard to find a name. We tried lots of different things, and I'm not quite sure exactly where that came from.
Oh, here we come.
Here we go, a wee bit of the video. Yeah. So this is Ships on the Clyde.
Need a little bit more volume, do we?
Yeah.
Too many ships have gone down, chasing the tide, and too many ways of happening, too many pride, and too many words I have said, so many compromise, too many words for so many. so many sprites. Ooh. So many talks about what would be or be without ships on the Clyde. And I can see you waving goodbye. And I can see you, the sun's in my eyes. Ships on the Clyde. 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 The Clyde. There's too many brides. There's too many brides. There's too many brides.
So, the side of Gerard Burns, not many people have seen, I would think.
Oh,
I think
wow.
clearly a missed opportunity by the record label, that one, I think.
Well, we were signed to, at that point, we were signed to A&M, so we did actually get a deal. But we just, politics, internal record company politics, the guy who signed us left, and all of his bands basically were kind of kicked off with him. But we had a good album, a really, really good album in us. Just never really got the chance. And that song, that's amazing. It's a wee while since I've watched it. That's a good piece.
Mm-hmm.
When you think the age when that was made, that's a long time ago. That stands the test of time, I would say. And it's, I mean, maybe I keep thinking these things will maybe have their day. You think of the number of documentaries that were made about the Clyde, where that song could be part of that narrative. You know, it's already 1984. It's part of our history, you know. But this was the story of Valerie. We just never really we never managed to get over that threshold, you know. Mm-hmm. And you were asking about the name.
Yeah, sorry.
So the name Valerie in the Week of Wonders, it was just basically, it was presented to us. I think it was maybe Brian, the guitarist, who came up with it. And we all thought, do you know what? It's just so daft. It's just such a ridiculous name. Right, that's fine. That's who we're going to be. Only to discover much later that it's actually a really bizarre Hungarian film entitled Valerie and Her Week of Wonders, which is, as you might imagine, a fantasy about a girl's first period. So when we discovered that, we thought possibly as a rock band that maybe wasn't the best choice for us.
Not the best choice, but and then after music, I think you went into teaching. We do have a question that's come in on the chat from one of our guests about how St. Aloysius shaped you.
Gosh, I went into teaching almost grudgingly. I went in, I wanted to be a musician. It was obvious it wasn't going to happen. The music business really wasn't suiting me. There was lots of things about it, but I thought, no, went into teaching, sort of, you know, thinking, well, okay, it's a default, let's try it. And just loved it. I just absolutely loved it. Good teaching is theatre. It's performance, you know. was a temporary teacher in a couple of quite rough schools around about Glasgow. And again, just absolutely loved it. But at that point, couldn't get a job. There's no jobs. The job at St Aloysius came up, and it was actually my dad who'd said to me, look, this job, it's in the papers, why don't you apply? Applied thinking I had no chance, and basically got the interview, and they said to me afterwards, my application was dreadful. But as my dad always says, if I get the interview, I'll get the job. And I think I went and basically I sold them on who I was, what I could bring to the thing, and was appointed a teacher. I got the teaching job, and within a year, I was principal. Now, an extremely brave decision on their part to give a 29-year-old the principal's job. And basically it coincided with a decision within the school to expand the arts because it had been almost like in a non-subject really up to that point. They spent some money on it. And I would actually say teaching itself, although ultimately teaching, it became too difficult. Teaching was the making of me. Teaching's an amazing profession. You think about the things that are valued, Gordon, in your profession, and everybody who's listening. The ability to manage your time, the ability to carry the thread of an argument, the ability to project manage, the ability to deliver on time, the ability, you could tick them off one after another. And any good teacher must have those qualities on a daily basis to be able to do what they do. It's an amazing job. And when I left teaching, I thought, well, I'm almost unskilled, and then realised, Christ, I've got these things that you take for granted as a teacher are gold. And if you like, in the real world, any one of those qualities would be valued in any company.
And I think it was while you were a teacher that I think you touched on that you got the love for painting back, and you started making lots of paintings to the point where you entered and won, I think, the McFarlane Prize. That appears to be a bit of a turning point.
And it was, and this is all still about self-belief, if I go right back to the beginning of it. So I'd come through art school, I tried to be a musician, that didn't quite work out. I went into teaching and discovered I loved it, and also rediscovered this love of painting. And I suppose also what teaching did was it gave me some money so that I could buy materials, so I was able to buy oil paints. And what I did, which I think was probably quite revolutionary, was I encouraged my staff, to be artists, to work. We eventually created this big open plan art department. So I would have these big that paintings on the go. While the kids were in and they were working away, while there was kids in other areas, I would be working on my paintings. And that turned out to be an amazing source of inspiration for the kids, to see me taking it seriously, to see me producing these paintings. Particularly for the upper school, it was the ultimate incentive, if you like, for them to work hard and sort of achieve that level. So on so many levels, teaching was the making of me.
Have any of your former pupils gone on to do wonderful things in art?
I lost touch so completely when I left St Aloysius. I wasn't well, and I really had to cut that tie. And I discovered relatively recently one of my best students, a guy called David Freer. He actually has gone on to do really well for himself in the design world, and he has designed a lot of the new banknotes. I'm not sure which bank, but he branched off into that direction. One of the boys did really, really well in the fashion world. But you've got to imagine in St Aloysius, no one had gone to art school, ever. I think maybe one person in the history of St Aloysius before we got there. And within 5 years or so, we had generations of kids. We had kids going to art school every year. Dundee, Edinburgh, Glasgow, brilliant kids. Now, I feel slightly embarrassed. I maybe don't know what they've gone on to do, but certainly they made that leap from school, an academic private school, to art school, which was completely new ground.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you made a big difference. I've got another question from one of our guests, which takes us back to art school a little bit. and you're being asked, did you benefit at all from your time at art school? And if you had your time again, would you go back?
No, categorically. I found art school quite tough, and it's only now that I understand myself a bit better. I was probably too young, and I think a lot of the time people go to university and college, you're too young. And I went to art school expecting to be taught. That was my expectation. And that just isn't what art school is about. And I think it's a mistake in art schools. You're almost expected to arrive fully formed, and they give you the space and the time to realise your potential, when in truth, you don't know what your potential is. And again, I'm going to go back to the musical analogy. You go to the RSMAD, you're grilled, you're absolutely grilled, you're hammered with technique. And that's what I expected at art school, on the basis that once you have the technique, once that's a given, you're then able to really push out and explore who it is you are as an artist. Did I take anything from it? It would be ludicrous to say that I didn't. And actually that exploration in the final years, the final year and a half, what it did was it gave me an understanding of the abstract nature of paint. Without that experience, the surfaces of my canvases matter massively. People talk about my work as being quite photographic, very photographic. But if you have the opportunity to get next to one of the originals, the surface really matters. And that, if anything, is what I took. Because I worked in an abstract way, I still tend to think about paint, although the end product is very, very representational. I still think about paint in a purely abstract way. So that's something without question that I took from those final years at art school.
Okay, thank you for that question and the answer, Gerard. The next thing I was going to ask you about, I actually found this quite hard to read in the book. It was the part about after you'd won the prize and you'd built up a bit of a portfolio. I think you approached some galleries in Glasgow, thinking they might exhibit your work, and you didn't get the kind of response that you got complete rejection, as far as I can see. How did that feel at the time?
So, I mean, it was more than a bit of a rejection. I mean, these are cathartic points in your life. The points where you could go one way or you could go another. I went down to see Bilcliffe, Roger Bilcliffe. I don't know Roger at all. Actually, Roger had been quite involved with the Macfarlane. So I assumed that because I'd won the Macfarlane, there might be an in there. And as I say, I was producing work at really quite high end. And I went down to see him and I took this portfolio. It was a ghastly experience. You go down with your paintings in a portfolio. And he saw me and good for him. He said, look, Gerard, I'm going to be quite frank with you. I want to exhibit your work. And if I can be honest with you, I can't think of another single gallery in the United Kingdom who will. And I came out, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, but I'm selling paintings. I'm selling paintings. You know, I know that this works. I've just won a big prize. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I suppose I could have, gone away and curled up in the wee corner. But what I thought was, well, that's fine, actually. See if there's not a single gallery who will show my work. Then I just won't go to galleries. And I'll just do it a different way. And that was the start of the template for the way that I have built my business, where my business has always been one-to-one. So you make a painting, you make a good job of it. People see that painting and they say, I'm going to speak to him. And in a nutshell, that's the way that it's gone for the last 20 years. And those ripples just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually there's a momentum on its own. But so from that point, as I say, that conversation, that really kind of set me on the path, which has taken me to where I am now.
And if people haven't been to Fairhill, where you live and where your studio is and where your gallery is, and of course they'd be able to do that. We've got the video at kind of halftime that'll give some insight into that, and we might talk more about it. From that low point, it feels like the next big break was, I mean, some of your work hung in some quite trendy restaurants and clubs in Glasgow. I think Ewan McGregor saw one of your pieces and commissioned a portrait. That's probably worth telling us about how that came about.
So there's a bar in Glasgow called Mojo. A pal of mine, a guy called Bobby Patterson, who sadly died quite a few years ago. Bobby was a real visionary, and he opened up Mojo, which was a kind of New York type bar lounger, again in the 80s, very unusual, quite groundbreaking. And basically I had 3 really big canvases in that bar. He then went on to, the first of them sold to a guy called Jake Scott, one of my first bull paintings. There's Ewan and I. So again, in terms of self-belief, the first of the paintings sold to a guy, and I went over to New York, and he paid me at the time, and he paid me a fortune. I think he paid me £3,000 for this painting, which was just wow, completely wow. Mojo then morphed, and they took on a place called Groucho St Jude's, which was also on Bath Street opposite the Art Club, and basically took that formula and expanded on it, created a hotel, and once again my paintings were displayed throughout the hotel. And Ewan, he was making Young Adam, and in Groucho St Jude's there was a suite at the top floor, basically a self-contained apartment. And he stayed there for, I think, 8 weeks or 9 weeks while he was making this film, and basically came down to the restaurant and sat beneath this big painting every day. And eventually he moved on. No, sorry, you're going to have to bear with me because none of my stories are straightforward. He moved on. And I'd met him. I came to meet him in St Jude's, which was fantastic. Got a chance to say hello. And the painting then sold. It sold to someone else. And the day after it sold, Ewan contacted me to say, Gerard, look, I can't get that painting out of my head. I'd like to buy it. So I said, well, you're not going to believe this, but it's just sold. But let me contact the person who's bought it to see if they'll sell me it back, given you're Ewan McGregor. Contacted the guy and he said, no, it's my painting. I'm keeping it. So I then had to go back to Ewan and say, look, I don't know what to say to you here, but this is, look, give me a chance. You know, I mean, obviously you like that painting. I'll try and make something maybe, and you can have first crack at it. So time passed on. I made a painting. Ewan didn't like the second painting that I had made. And this person, their own finances and the business that he was in went under. And I got word to say that this painting was coming up for auction. So I bought it back and contacted Ewan, and this would be months and months later, maybe a year later or more, to say, look, this is the way things have gone. Would you be interested? So he absolutely jumped at it. And him and I have stayed. The thing about, because of what I do, Gordon, it's an odd route. And if any people that I deal with, you tend to make, there's a relationship. You and I had a good example. You bought some work from me. So Ewan and I have stayed in good touch, good contact. I saw him when I was over in New York. He'd taken the painting over there with him. He took me down to his apartment to see the painting. And that was my first big celebrity endorsement. And I was unaware at that point just how important that is for anyone to have celebrity endorsement. I didn't particularly chase it, but there was newspaper articles about it, and the fact that his name was tagged on, so anytime anybody introduced me, anytime anybody wrote anything about me, collected by Ewan McGregor, and it was amazing. The work just took a step up in people's estimations. The work wasn't actually any better, but there was just that level of endorsement which took it in terms of people's perceptions to a different level.
The power of celebrity, eh?
Yeah, for sure.
And you've painted a few of those. And we're going to talk about a number, Doddy in particular. I think we'll talk about Doddy after the break. I think so we need to give that kind of proper time, and we can see the video. As we move towards the break, I think it's probably worth talking a bit about the studio and the gallery. And you mentioned, I've been out there a few times, and it always amazes me how many pieces of work you're working on at any one time. Can you explain how that works, or why you do it that way?
Short span of attention. In a nutshell, short span of attention. So, okay, so here's a message for everybody listening. Try your best to play to your strengths. Recognize your weaknesses, but try to play to your strengths. I have a short span of attention. It's that simple. I can only concentrate on anything for a certain amount of time. And bizarrely, when I was teaching and I was painting, I produced these amazing paintings without realizing that played to my strengths, because I only had an hour and a half or 2 hours maximum every evening. But when I went full time as an artist, all of a sudden I had this ocean of time. And what happened was I began to paint the paintings round in circles. I lost my way. And it was only when I finally moved, or I built my first proper studio, that I understood that if I had 3 paintings on the go, that I could dip in, I could move between the paintings. And what happened was there was a reset. So I could work on a thing for an hour, and then I could move it and bring something else over, and I could work on that for an hour. And that magpie, that way of working basically suits me perfectly. And because I work with the same palette, I have a very tight tonal palette, it means that I can literally at any point, if I've got paintings all around me, I can be working on a portrait in one painting, and I can turn around and I can put that final tweak onto something which I've only just noticed. So the paintings just nudge themselves. That's the best way to think about it. They just nudge themselves through the studio. I never, ever start a painting and finish it in one, ever. It's basically one of, and they all just kind of move. And the beauty of that is, at the end of the day, I make lots of paintings because I'm not just concentrating on one. There's lots of them coming through the studio at the same time.
And another fascinating thing I think about your method is you use artists' apprentices.
I do.
So how do they fit in? And
well, again, see, the old masters, if it was good enough for Rembrandt, and good enough for Titian, the very first person I brought on board was my wife's cousin, a girl called Laura Kearney, who's now an established artist in her own right. Laura came to work with me at a point where I realised a painting basically consists of layers. If you think about it in terms of layer 1 to 5, and this is exactly what the old masters did. So layer 1 has to be the artist. I have to create the line drawing. I have to decide where the objects are placed. Layers 2 and 3, without trying to talk the thing down, I could put a brush in your hand, Gordon, and you could. It's basically just, I've used the complicated colouring in. Essentially what you need to do is you need to establish that base layer, which is essentially about creating more or less quite large areas of colour. And on that basis, I brought somebody in and I thought, well, why am I painting that shape red? No, it's going to take me just as long to do that as it would take you. So I brought in an apprentice. But as Laura became more confident and she became more able, she was then able to take it from layer 2 to layer 3, which involves a degree of modelling. And if you take that as a basis, if you bring in an educated hand, my older cousin John worked with me. He still does to do certain things, and we have these large balancing act pieces where there's lots of city going on in the background. Now, in the early days, I did everything, but I could be an old man of 90 still standing painting windows in cities and thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? So you bring in someone who's able to come and do that job. And what I do is I start and I finish. And that's exactly what the old masters did. So probably, depending on the painting, still 75 to 80% of what you see is still my hand. But it's the layers between the blank canvas and that final layer that take the time, and that's basically what the apprentices do.
I think that's fascinating, and I guess there are similarities with, you know, partners in law and accountancy practices or in the professions that do, you know, similar things, really.
Absolutely.
Interesting it works in art. The other thing I'm interested in, and I'm sure others will be, is the process for making a portrait, and how you go about that, because I think Nicola Sturgeon said, you've done a cracking portrait of Nicola Sturgeon, that she would never have been able to sit for any amount of time. I think Doddy said something similar. So how do you do that?
So it's easy to look at the way I work now and maybe to pat myself in the back and think, gosh, I'm clever at this. Everything that I have learned, I've learned because I've done it the wrong way to start. And eventually, if you're a pragmatic person, you think, right, well, that didn't work, that was stressful. So there's lots of nonsense again about, you know, a portrait is only a portrait if you have the sitter in the studio. People like Lucy and Freud, where it was psychological torture what he put his models through. For someone like me, for the way that I work, essentially what I need is information. The old masters, whether people accept it, believe it or not, they worked with projection. They eventually, the discovery by Galileo and people of lenses, David Hockney proved without a shadow of a doubt that all of the old masters, they all worked with these things. So basically, if you like, that's a form of photography. You would sit a subject in a brightly lit room. The artist would sit in a dark room, and you would get a projection. And they would basically draw around this, and they would use that as the basis for their. So photography, the idea that you wouldn't use photography to make portraits in this day and age is just beyond ridiculous. So, so having done it, as I say, with sitters, eventually you say no. And it means if I've got the photographs, I can go and work at 2 in the morning if I want to. You then basically, so you're saying, well, these are the building bricks, you've got the tools, I need the information. But what I think the strength of my portraits is, and this has taken many years to understand, is that, and this will sound bizarre, a good portrait is nothing to do with the likeness. I've said this 100 times. If anybody listening were to go into their phone right now, you'll have 1,000 photographs of your loved ones. You tell me which one of those is the likeness, which one is the image which encapsulates that individual. So what I have to do as an artist is I have to work out who I'm painting. And for every single person, there's 1,000 different answers to that question. Is it the father? Is it the daughter? Is it the businessman? Is it the sports person? Do they want to look strong? Are they willing to show a bit of vulnerability? So it's, and this is in the book as well, I would say a good portrait's 90% psychology. Until I understand those things, how can I possibly make a portrait? Now, Nicola was slightly exceptional because I wasn't commissioned to make that. I asked her if she would do it. And it's probably a perfect example of maybe professionalism. I went through to Butte House to meet her. I was nervous. She was nervous. She was really nervous. I mean, it was bizarre. The light in the room was a disaster. It was big windows and the light was all my flashes wouldn't work. And she started to make these bizarre shapes. I said, my First Minister, could you stand beside the couch? And she was doing all this really awkward stuff. And I thought, I don't think I'm going to get this. I genuinely don't think I'm going to get this. And I turned away at one point to think, right, what am I going to do next? And when I turned round, she was standing watching me. And I think probably thinking, what is this clown? What's he going to do now? And for that split second, and I suppose that's the moment where I'm looking and I'm aware enough to think that's the shot. It was everything that I hoped, everything I'd come to think. It's got a bit of swagger about it. It's got a wee bit of gallus. Young woman, she's got hips, she's got legs, and it's set within the context of Butte House, So all of those elements which were in my head, they all came together just for that split second. And she actually she started to move. And I'm saying, no, that's it. And of course, as soon as she realised, it was so natural to her. That's the way she stands. I think she says that in the book. You know, if she's talking, that's what she does.
No, she says something like that. Yeah, it's just perfect. It's just you've captured her, and I think that's what you're talking about. That's what you do. Yeah, you capture the person. Yeah, it's it's incredible. Where does that hang now? Does that hang in Bute House now?
No, we can't do anything with that portrait while she's First Minister. She would be lambasted, vanity, all of these things. So that portrait's with me. I have it. And at the point, whenever she steps down, I would assume it will go to the National Portrait Gallery. I'd be astonished if it doesn't. So as I say, there's a few, I've had people kind of sniffing around it, but I've really just decided no. Until we know, there will be a place for it, that's for sure.
Excellent. And as you know, just before we go to the video, a few minutes before we go to the video of the gallery and studio, it's probably worth spending just explaining what happens there, because it's the center of everything, isn't it? It's not just painting. It's a hub where start to finish you produce and distribute.
Okay, so leading on from that conversation about Mr. Bilcliffe, this is the natural end conclusion to that. For a while, I did decide to go with galleries, and I got myself in a terrible fankle, probably because I'm maybe quite difficult to work with. I've got too many of my own ideas, and I'm too proactive. So I was involved with a load of galleries who I was doing loads and loads of promotional work, and they were basically just selling the paintings. So there came a point where we thought, right, well, we're going to do this, and if we're going to do it, we need to find a house. And to find a house that's big enough to allow me to have a proper studio, and it's big enough to allow me to put enough paintings up on the wall. So after a year of searching, we eventually found this beautiful old sandstone house in Dullator. I have my studio in the grounds. We have a framing studio. My oldest son and my middle son are my framers. And we run our business from this house. My wife, my youngest son, my daughter-in-law, they take care of, there's lots of other layers, the prints, and all sorts of other things. And twice a year we have a formal exhibition here, invitation only, because it's our home. People can't just walk in off the street. And basically it gives me an opportunity to contact everyone who's ever bought a painting, and basically let them know I'm still here, that I'm still working. Some years we're really busy, some years we're not busy, some years hardly anyone comes, but I sell lots of stuff from the website, either side of it. So it's a discipline, basically. And this year, because of COVID, for 2 pins, I thought, well, I'm not going to do it. And then I thought, no, that's wrong. So I had an online exhibition. And the video that people are about to see, basically, I did what I would do if people came to the house. I greeted them at the door, and I took them round the house, and I let them see the house and the studio. Possibly we'll only, time that we've got, we'll maybe just do the house bit of it. But essentially that's it. It's an opportunity to come, no pressure. People can come and have a wander around, have a bit of a chat, and they can see the setup. And often, Gordon, I say what happens is that you won't sell work at the exhibition, but people, as a seed planted, and people will go away and they'll think about it, and it could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, and eventually those ripples that we were speaking about, you know, eventually they'll come and buy a painting.
There is a little health warning, certainly. You know, you go to Gerard's place at Fairhill and it's stunning, and you go there to buy a painting and you have one thing in mind, and if you're not careful, you end up spending a little bit more money than you expect. Yeah, you end up coming with all sorts of ideas. The people, if they haven't, our guests this evening, if they haven't been to Fairhill, might be thinking, how do they get on the guest list, or how might they get an invitation?
Just basically to email, just all the various channels, through the social media channels, through there's a contact on the website. And actually this year I'm going to do I'll do an online exhibition. We'll do it next weekend. And it is possible actually by appointment that people can come. one or two at a time, so that would be fine. It's a real miss. Some artists don't like having people look at their work in their presence. Some artists are daunted by that. I love it because I learn about my paintings by watching other people stand in front of them. I find it absolutely fascinating, the things that stop people. You know, some individuals will walk straight past a painting and not even notice, and for others, it stops them dead in their tracks. So I absolutely love that. And actually, I usually take quite a bit away from the event on those terms. So it's been a miss for me, I have to say, this year, and hopefully next year we'll manage to get back to it properly.
Good. We've got about 1 minute before Victoria, I think, maybe puts the video on. So I have a question from Graham Duncan, who's one of our guests this evening, who is asking: your pictures are generally on the large side. How would you approach? How would your approach to composition style and subject matter differ if you're persuaded to paint miniatures?
I couldn't do it. It's as simple as that. I just couldn't do it. I instinctively paint large, and in order to make a living from this, I had to learn to paint small. I had to, all of the ideas, everything that you see started off big, and there's basically, I've had to learn to take that down. But where portraits and things are concerned, you end up, you're working with the head of a needle. So what happens as the paintings get smaller, there tends to be less background. If there's an individual, if there's a portrait involved, if there's a face involved, there has to be a certain size for me to actually do. There are other artists who can work smaller, but it's not for me. I can't do it.
Excellent. That was a very clear answer. Hopefully Victoria can now move to the video, and we'll take a 10-minute break. Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Fairhill Summer Exhibition 2020, an unusual undertaking by any standards. I did swither about whether to have a show this year or not, but I've been busy. If you've been following me on social media during lockdown, you'll have seen that I've been in the studio, so there's lots of new stuff. Seemed mad, therefore, not to at least let you see what's been going on. If you've been here before, much of what you're about to see will be familiar to you. If not, this wee film should give you some sense of what we do here and about the various spaces that we have in this fantastic old sandstone house. Your feedback, as always, much appreciated. We're trying this. I don't know how this is going to feel for you. I don't know how this is going to go. If you think there's a better way to do it, I'd be very interested to hear. But as I say, this wee film should at least give you some sense of the space itself, and via the website it should give you some idea of the paintings that I've been working on. There are obviously lots of different categories in my work, and it's important that I make sure when I'm putting on these exhibitions that there are good examples of just about everything that I do. Ordinarily, I will have people coming who are coming specifically to see the Saltire paintings, specifically to see the ballet paintings, the Woman in Winter landscape. So I try my best to make sure that there are at least one or two good examples in each of those different categories. The big painting on the wall behind me here, interestingly, this has been with me for a wee while. There was a much bigger version of this which it sold a few years ago, but this one was actually out on loan. It was through in St Andrew's House. Nicola had it on the wall of her office for a couple of years, and they moved her. They moved her to a new room, an oak panelled room, and the painting couldn't go on the wall, so it came back to us here. There are, in the exhibition this time, probably 60% of the work that's on the website and the work that's up for show is brand new. But as always, there are paintings which I will bring on from previous exhibitions, and as I say, maybe work which has been on loan, which we get back to try and balance up the show and make sure, as I say, that there's a good spread of work in all of the various different categories. The house consists of 4 big rooms downstairs and a big hallway. They are euphemistically named music room, TV room, and I'll show you in a wee while. My son Ryan has a recording studio as in one of the rooms at the back. So you can maybe just hear in the background there's always music going on. And I think in terms of the narrative that we've created here, this is an amazing space. It's a truly and genuinely creative space. This particular space is slightly more intimate, but you can see on the walls behind me here, again, still big walls, which allows us to display these bigger paintings. And at the moment, it's probably slightly overdone in terms of work. You would struggle to live with as many paintings, I suppose. But it allows us to display a kind of wide variation of works, again, within the context of a home, within the context of a sitting room, so that it's much easier for people to visualise how the things might look in their own space. This space in the back hallway is a slightly awkward one, to be honest. It's a wee bit difficult to light. It tends to work better for the summer exhibitions where there's more natural light. In the winter it can be a bit of a challenge, but there's no question it's an amazing display area, which changes constantly. Work moves across this space on a weekly, if not monthly basis. And what I will do often in the house is that I use the house as the final layer in terms of finishing the paintings. Because all of this is put together under the one roof, my oldest son Matthew is my framer. So the paintings are made in the studio, they go into the frames in the studio. That gives you another kind of view of the work. It allows you to see things that you don't see otherwise. And then very often they'll come down here and they'll come into this space or to other spaces in the house. And it's amazing that kind of daily walking past the painting, it gives me often that last wee chance to see the thing objectively, to see it without seeing it. And 9 times out of 10, what will happen is there'll be a painting will go up here, and before too long, it ends up back in the studio, and I'll put those very last final marks on it, which just take it to that last 5%. I wanted to say something specific about this painting. If you follow me on social media, you will have seen this one already. Every now and again, what I'll do is I'll push a painting out and I'll ask for people to name it. The name of a painting It's an incredible thing, and the name of a painting matters massively. I don't start off with a name in mind. I have shapes, I have themes, and then there comes a point where you've got to give it a name. And to be honest, it's something that over many years I've kind of struggled with it. I don't like the name to be too specific because it takes the painting in too particular a direction. So when I put this up online, and the response was incredible actually. I got hundreds of suggestions, some daft ones, some maybe quite obvious ones, but the one I chose was put forward by the very wonderful Tricia Marwick, and she suggested that we should call this Fillan, after Saint Fillan, and there's a legend associated with Saint Fillan. So actually the name itself means little wolf, which I thought was just perfect, and it adds that wee tiny extra layer of intrigue into the thing. It brings that extra dimension, I suppose, because of the name, and it's a name which never in a million years would I ever have come up with on my own. So Tricia, once again, thank you. The last significant area in the downstairs of the house is this sunroom. We added this when we renovated the house, and what this does is it provides a link between the house itself and the garden, and then on and up into the studio. This is a gorgeous space, lots of natural light, and between this and the kitchen, as I say, this is really where the family, where we spend most of our time. On the wall behind me here, you can see a new painting, which is part of this theme that I've been exploring over the last few years, within the theme of a winter journey. And again, for me, there's no big narrative for this painting. I like the idea that the title is slightly open-ended so that people can bring themselves to it. This painting for me will probably always be a lockdown painting. I began work on this just after we went into lockdown. And I suppose a lot of the uncertainty, a lot of the bizarreness of the situation, every time I look at it, and I'm sure every time that I look at it from here on in, I'll remember being in that space and I remember working on this. But I think there's a gorgeous stillness about the painting. There's a peacefulness about it, which I suppose is what we were all trying to achieve during that kind of odd time. It's a big piece, metre by a metre and a half. And although these paintings are not everyday sales, it matters to me very much that I've got something like this on the go all the time. I struggle to make smaller paintings. I'm only able to make smaller paintings as well as these bigger, more challenging pieces. And I don't know whether because of the intensity of that early time in lockdown, I think this is an exceptional piece. In terms of what I do, there are paintings which I really connect with. So if this doesn't go anywhere for a long time, I'll be quite happy to have it here. So this is my daily commute. I certainly think of worse places to work, that's for sure. Okay, in the last wee part of the tour, if things were as normal, would be to come and have a look at the studio. There's always a bit of a dilemma for me when the show's on with the studio. Should I tidy it up? Should I leave it as it is? Is it more authentic? But the truth of the matter is, if I don't tidy up, it's a shambles. You know, I mean, I work in quite a chaotic way. Lots of things all going on at the same time. You can see on the wall behind me here, various examples of paintings, all at different stages. This quite nice sunny Spanish piece, which I started a few days ago. It's a complete mind shift from the intensity of the painting of the girl with the saltire. You can see on the floor behind me here also another in the red coat, the White Horse series. These paintings basically just move through this studio. They move through that wall there. That's the painting wall. And they basically just shift. I don't start a thing and finish it. I work on loads of different things at the same time, and they all just kind of nudge each other forward. Eventually they go into a frame. See this one here? So that's not finished yet. What I do is I'll put it in a frame, and that gives me that one last look at it. The frame changes the context. It goes down to the house, and as I said, very often it comes back up here again, and I'll do the last wee thing. I'm not going to linger too much over the studio, primarily because it's just such a mess. I'm going to show you one other thing, which would have been quite special had we been able to have the show as normal. This would have been really a wonderful thing to let people see. Something completely new, and again, something which has probably only happened because of lockdown, because I've been forced into this space with oceans of time, and discovered actually that I can't paint all the time. I can't do it. I just get completely exhausted. So this has been a bit of, again, a mind shift into a different medium. So the last wee piece of this tour is to let you see what I've been doing in terms of these new sculptures. I've been working with sculpture on and off for the last 4 or 5 years, really just trying to find my feet. I can sculpt. I knew I could sculpt, but I decided to go down a route where I tried to use existing technology. I tried to use 3D printing to see if it could get me part way towards where I wanted to go. I was at the point, having paired up with Edinburgh University, where I was about to embark on really quite an exciting programme, working with a couple of the final year students to really look at the combination of 3D printing and traditional clay sculptures. That was knocked on the head basically when we went into lockdown. So I was left with a situation where I had all these ideas going on in my head, things I wanted to do, and the choice was either do I wait until we can pick back up on that, or do I just push on? And I chose the latter. Very pleased that I did. But what lockdown gave me was the time, not being pulled in lots of different directions, no overseas trips. I was here in this studio, and it allowed me to really focus and really make mistakes, which is a luxury quite often we don't really have. The wee sculpture behind me here, this dancer, this has been tough because I didn't really know what I was doing at the start of it. Interestingly, the seated matador, that gave me no trouble. That came about quite naturally. So here he is, my seated minotaur. I think this is finished. It's difficult actually, until you can put a wee bit of space between yourself and the finished work to make that decision, but I think it's all holding together. This has been an amazing journey, I have to say. This is the first sculpture from scratch that I've made for decades. I feel really good about it. I think it's it's what I meant. I suppose you can't really say much more than that. The next stage is a technical one. I'm going to have to make a decision about exactly before it gets cast in, whether it's bronze. But yeah,
seated Minotaur.
So this is exciting. This is very exciting. These aren't for sale yet, but the next stage is to push these into bronze. And at that point, they will be for sale. But with luck, maybe by Christmas, I'll have managed to do both of these. Be very interested to know what your thoughts are on these wee sculptures. They haven't been seen. This is the first chance anybody's really had to look at them. So at this point, I need to know. I need some idea of, are they good? Is it worth pursuing? Only you guys can decide that, actually. So yeah, your thoughts would be very much appreciated. Okay, so there you have it. That's the tour. As I said at the start, if there's anything you want to speak to me about, I'll be around all weekend. We can FaceTime. And if you want to see any of these paintings, we can arrange to get them to you, no problem, and you can make the final decision in your own home. I look forward to the next Fairhill exhibition, which is normally sort of December time. Hopefully by then I'll be able to do things normally and to be able to invite you to the house to see the work in person. Okay?
Right, I think we're back, Gerard, are we?
Yep, I can see it.
Excellent. That's great. We got a bit of an extra treat there, getting a tour of the gallery and the studio as well as the gallery. So that was great. And you asked a question that people could react to with the reactions button, and give you a thumbs up if they like the sculptures, because you tweet up the question really nicely. So it'd be interested to see if people see what people think of them.
Well, it's amazing, Gordon. That's moved on. It seems you keep forgetting. Looking at ships in the Clyde earlier, looking at even in 6 months. So that's now a reality. The Minotaur is now cast. He's in bronze. Oh. And as a consequence of that wee video, I pre-sold 7 of them. People came back to me to say, we love it. So the statue itself will sell for, the finished work will sell for just under £5,000. But I said to people, if you're willing to commit to half of that now, you can have a sculpture on the basis that we don't really know exactly how this is going to turn out. So basically, yep, there he is.
Ah, good.
So basically, this is the finished work. And those sculptures literally yesterday, today and tomorrow are going to the 7 individuals who committed the money up front. So I'm absolutely convinced this will be a big part of who I am, of what I do going forward. And I think I'm going to stick with this theme. There's something about that Minotaur which obviously touched a spot for people.
That's fantastic, Gerard. I'm starting now to think, you can go off people. I mean, you started playing the guitar, then we're seeing wonderful paintings, and then you're sculpting.
What can I say?
Anyway, so we've had quite a few questions in the break. So my plan is to try and deal with guest questions first. I'll go through some of them. I'll try to go through most of them. Then, just for Victoria's benefit, who's our genius in the background, I was thinking, I was picking out some of the paintings that were in the gallery, like the Red Coat, the Red Door Angel, and the ballerinas. So I'm hoping we can get some images up of those, and then finish with Doddy as because that feels like the high point to finish on, if that sounds okay for the second half. Also, it's interesting that you get the most sophisticated questions from those nearest and dearest to you. So one of my fellow directors, Shireen, asked, "Who does your garden?"
That's brilliant. Well, actually, if anybody who asks, I'm actually a gardener who paints. I'm obsessed with my garden. The garden is the antidote. The studio is a really intense space. And actually, as I'm getting older, quite naturally, my ability to be in that space for really long periods of time is reducing. So because of the situation here, because I live and work from home, that garden, I can do 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours in the morning and come out absolutely almost my head spinning. Get the boots on and do an hour or 2 hours in the garden, and I'm fresh as a daisy. So I'm obsessed with gardening. I love it. We have a house in Spain, and I've created a garden over there also in very, very, very different conditions. So yeah, it's my sanity actually. And now the answer to the question is, I do it all myself.
Okay, well that's the bad news for Shireen then. It sounds like she might be doing her own garden. And my daughter Hannah asked me if I was sitting on a mini chair. So anyway, we'll move on to the more sensible questions. Zaki asked, and you touched on COVID and being locked down. How has it affected your inspiration and creativity?
It's been a challenge because if you think, okay, to be arty-farty about it, as an artist to an extent, you're a conduit. To be who I am and to do what I do, I'm reinterpreting the world around me, and to be shut off from the world has been a real challenge. I found it extremely difficult, and I did say actually I found the time in the studio. I imagined at the start of lockdown, I thought, well, okay, good, yeah, this is fine, bring it on, no distractions. I'm going to really revel in this. I'm going to be that artist, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it to the point where actually it became almost I felt sick at the idea of getting into the studio. So that the pushing on into sculpture, pushing on into different disciplines within the studio was the way that I coped with lockdown. That in the garden, if you remember, we had incredible weather. So that mixture basically allowed me to be hyper productive. I mean, I really did make a whole load of paintings. But I simply couldn't stand with a brush in my hand all day, every day. I couldn't do it.
And a related question also actually from Hannah was, you said you made a load of paintings. A typical portrait process, start to finish, how long might that take?
Okay, so, gosh, it's almost like how long is a piece of string. If I do all the groundwork, and we'll go over this when we're speaking about Doddie's portrait, if I get the groundwork right, if I understand exactly what I'm painting, it then, without meaning to talk it down, it then is essentially for 90% of what happens next, it's a technical process. So there's drying time, there's the application of layers, and actually I can take a painting from 0 to probably 75% complete in a matter of weeks if things go well. But the finishing, that last 15%, can take 2 months. It can take a month and a half. So I would say usually 2 months, absolute minimum. 3, ideally, that gives me the time to allow the thing to breathe. And it's those final filigree layers that I just can't do until I'm not looking at it for quite a while.
Going back to your point about portraits being 90% psychology, David is asking, have you ever painted straight from a photo, having never met the person, or does that work?
I've been asked to do it. Okay, I've been asked. I was commissioned to make a portrait of Margot MacDonald posthumously. Jim approached me to say that there was a sum of money left over from the Margot Mobile. He would like to commission a painting, and so I accepted the commission. We donated the money. I didn't take any money for it, but I then had to go and try and find images of Margot. Now you would assume someone like Margot MacDonald, there would be millions, but it was incredibly difficult. So what I had to do in that instance was to try to find images which were like the type of photographs I would have taken. And I found 2 quite separate, quite distinct images, and we had to really work hard using Photoshop to take those images and to reposition the images. So it is possible. And the portrait I made 2 actually of Margot ultimately. One of them hangs in the Parliament, just where she sat. She sat, there was a couch just as you went into the members' lounge, and it worked. It worked 100%. It was a good piece, but it was a really, really tough. And there were points where I almost thought, okay, this isn't going to. And it was only by being able to find those images that the thing was able to happen.
Okay, thank you. Great answer. We've got a few from Martin McHugh. What 3 people in the world would you love to do a portrait of? Or if you can't think of 3, 1 would be good.
Good for you, Martin. Thanks for that. Who would I like to paint? I would have loved to have painted Sean Connery. There was a chance for the New York show. He said yes, but he ended up, even at that point, that would be 5 years ago, he had to come back and say, look, I'm not well. That would have been really something, actually, just to get the chance. I was thinking about it, actually, the other day, this idea of, who, and I suppose within the context of all my heroes, I was brought up Catholic, and I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, so this answer has nothing to do with that, but I would love to get a chance to paint the current Pope. I would love to get a chance to do that, and to try and actually see that individual, how I could tackle that with the hand skills that I've got, with the approach that I have in relation to my heroes. Velasquez and Titian and all of these people, how would I measure up with a subject like that? There's one other I could throw in. Now this is not one I want to do, but I actually, the other person who said yes for the New York show was Donald Trump. Now that would have been an interesting one. And my wife actually said, if you paint him, I'm going to divorce you. But I would have done it. I mean, and actually I knew what I would do to do what he needed, but also for it to be what I also needed, maybe tongue firmly in cheek. So I don't know, that's a slightly convoluted answer to the question, but those are 3 who were there or thereabouts.
If you had painted Trump, or if you ever get the chance to paint Trump, I think probably I certainly would have loved to be the fly on the wall when you unveil it. I think that would be a moment.
I know, and I knew for sure. And actually, it was all set up. I was going to go and meet him. There was a date set, and basically, then he announced his candidacy, and things just went off like a rocket. But basically, he said he would do it, and it was all set up for me to go up to the golf course, and that's where I would have set it. Basically, sort of almost Spanish King, chin up, the trews, the golf club, And I think anybody looking at it would have thought, well, he's maybe taking the piss a bit here. Mm-hmm. But
I've heard he's might have a little bit more time on his hands, and he might be in Scotland.
Who knows? Yeah. So I need to be careful what I'm saying.
You've maybe touched on this. The next question was, who's your favourite artist of all time?
The Spanish artist Velasquez, without a shadow of a doubt. It remains a mystery to me. It remains, with all of the skills that I've acquired, I got a chance to go to the Prado. I've been there a few times, and I just literally stand and greet in front of these things. They are impossible. They are impossible. What the guy was able to do with paint is the hand of God. So there you go. There's an answer.
I know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow now. And the next question is, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be?
I'm Scottish. For all its ups and downs and the crap weather, and this is where I am. We have a really, really, really fortunate situation where when I came out of teaching, it was the thing that people were doing at that point. We bought a house down near Cadiz, due south of Seville, on the Atlantic coast in Andalusia. So I'm able to split my time between here and over there. Usually we're there for 3 months of the year, but my life is here, and everywhere I go, New York, Hong Kong, I'm more convinced than ever that Scotland's the place for me. This is where my family, where my life is. So no, I wouldn't trade it for anything. Great
answer. I think the final question so far we've got from our guests anyways, how did your limited palette evolve?
So that goes back to understanding your weaknesses and playing to your strengths. One of the issues at art school for me, the very little help that I got was, I think I got given some paints at one point, and I just got completely lost in greens and blues and oranges and pinks. And so these are things that should be taught at art school. These are things that people should know. I had to take it back and I had to learn all of this myself, basically the hard way. All you need is 3 colours plus black and white. That's all you need. With a wee bit of knowledge of colour theory, you can do just about everything with 3 primary colours plus black and white. Now it gets a bit complicated because you need effectively 2 reds. There's a blood red, which is the crimson, and there's a really warm red. The red coat on the wall behind you is cadmium red. You've got 2 yellows. You've got a cold and a warm yellow, and you've got a cold and a warm blue, believe it or not. Cerulean is a sky blue, and ultramarine would be that really deep, cold Scottish water blue. With those colours and black and white, you can do literally everything. So in order to get around my inability to cope with colour, I restrict my palette, and essentially my palette is a tonal palette. I would say it's a Scottish palette. We live in a tonal world, but for the occasional burst of sunshine, we live in a tonal world, which is why I don't really understand there are Scottish artists who paint these super brightly coloured landscapes, where they get it from. But what we do as Scots, we impose colour on the city, on the landscape, on ourselves with our clothes. So that's the way that it's evolved for me. And as I say, there's a security for me in the knowledge that I know exactly what I have to do. I know exactly where I need to push the paint. And maybe in a subsequent podcast, there's a great wee lesson I do. I do it with I'm up to date with my kids, my grandchildren's primary school. And if you do this with kids, if you show them, there's the 3 colours, and you just start to add a black and white to it, it's simply astonishing how that grows and where that, and you can see their eyes are popping out of their heads. And for the teachers as well, you're saying, look, that's all you need. But these things could be being taught, and to my knowledge, they're not really.
I think I'd love to see that.
Yeah, there you go.
There was a great link in there, I think, to the red coat. So perhaps Victoria can, because that was probably the work of yours that first caught my eye and drew me in. So you could perhaps give us a little bit of background to where the red coat images came from.
Everything starts off from that being in the world, actually seeing things. I've always been completely fascinated by Glasgow in winter, Glasgow in the rain. You know, to say that you love Glasgow when the sun's shining, of course you do, but that's not what the love of that city is about. And, you know, our sensibilities basically are about the city and the rain. And people talk about in the winter. I remember a cousin of mine saying, you know, she gets depressed in the winter because the streets go black. You know, the rain. I think the opposite. When you go into the city in the winter, you've got light from above and below. And these paintings, I suppose, were a response to that. Now, these have become extremely well known, and these have become really, really popular. But when I first started making these, I remember my dad saying to me, I mean, Gerard, who's going to buy a painting of Glasgow in the rain? You know, I mean, it was almost inconceivable. But that's what we see. That's what we see when we're in about the towns and the cities in Scotland. And this girl is my sister-in-law. Roseanne turned up one day. The initial paintings were a kind of black coat, and she turned up one day with this beautiful red coat on, and I thought, well, there you go. That's the next step in this, and that's how it evolved.
Thank you. Yeah, they're stunning paintings. I think now's maybe the time if we can tee up I think there's a good video of the ballerinas. Perhaps you can talk me into, I think the ballerinas are relatively new, but again, they're also stunning pieces of work.
Okay, so while that's happening, I had been trying for years. I've been working with ballet dancers for many years, unofficially. Basically, a couple of dancers had been my models in some of the older paintings, but I'd never managed to establish a relationship with Scottish ballet itself. And I don't know if anybody listening has ever had the opportunity to go over to Scotland Week. Scotland Week's a bizarre entity. You meet people over there that you couldn't get near in a million years here in Scotland. So Scottish Ballet were doing a pop-up. They were doing an event over in New York, and they did a pop-up exhibition in the Norwood Club over there, which Nicola Sturgeon was attending. And I was able to actually get a hold of the new director, a guy called Chris Hampson, and say to him, look, we should do something. We should do something together. So he gave me access, basically. He said, come and see us. And he gave me access backstage for the performance of a ballet called The Fairy's Kiss. I took my camera, and basically what I saw absolutely blew me away. So what you've got is this voyeuristic view from where I was, past the dancers and on out into the performance space. Not really what I expected to find when I first started doing them, but that was what I found when I was there. And I suppose going back almost to the Nicola Sturgeon portrait, that you have to be alive to what's going on around you. You have to be alive for that moment. So I took those images and I began to manipulate the images. I took some of the backdrops and I reimposed, and I made some paintings. And normally what happens when I introduce a new theme, including the red coats actually, so which have become really popular, it can take 6 months, it can take a year for these to really bed in, for people to accept, okay, this is the Gerard Burns painting. But these ballet paintings, just from the very first, from the moment I exhibited the first one, these have been a sensation. And probably of the paintings that I've sold over the last couple of years, the ballet paintings probably represent 70% of those sales. For all the obvious reasons. I mean, just the beauty of the subject. But I think, or at least I hope, Degas' shadow hangs so heavily over everything to do with the ballet. It's difficult to approach that subject without it being derivative, without you copying what he did. But I think because of the perspective, because of that layered approach to it, I think I've been able to say something else about those in those paintings. In Scottish Ballet themselves, they were delighted to so much so actually that we produced a calendar this year, and they took 12 of the images and they've produced a calendar with the images. So again, that further cements my relationship with Scottish Ballet, which means, I mean, the access that I got backstage, nobody gets that. It's sacrosanct. That space is for performers only. So to be allowed to do that was really, really special. But I've proved to them that give me that opportunity and I'll give you something back. So that's the way it's gone.
And I think as well, from memory, when you look at ballet and you've got all the beauty and elegance, what you saw at the backstage was a different side. It was more of the pain and the hardship. Absolutely,
Gordon. I mean, these dancers, it is the ultimate smoke and mirrors. They're on that stage and they look as if they are weightless. It looks effortless. But when these kids come off, they have run a 100-meter sprint. It's the most grueling. And you see them gathering themselves, taking that big deep breath and then launching themselves back out. We did, just after the first paintings went up online, we did a thing with Radio Scotland. Actually, I think radio is a brilliant medium for talking about, for paintings. You would think it's a visual, but actually with the right presenter, to talk about paintings is a brilliant way to explore art. And we did a three-way thing with one of the presenters from Radio Scotland, an art historian and myself, and the director, Chris Hampson. And we spoke about those layers, and he used a word which has really stuck with me. He talked about the brutality of the performance space. Now, you think that that's the word that no one would associate with the ballet, but from a ballet dancer's perspective, that white hot heat, nowhere to hide, and that's the word that you used a few times, that brutal performance space. And it gives you a totally different perspective on how that's seen by the dancers.
That's fascinating. I think before we go to the Doddy work to finish, the Red Door Angel is one of my favourite paintings of yours. We might be able to have a look at that. And Zaki was asking about paintings that perhaps, you know, evoke a lot of emotion. I suspect that one might. Do you want to talk us through this one, Gerard?
This painting evolved. There's always a start point, I suppose. I was in Jerez airport, and there was a book. It's quite a small airport. There was a book in one of the stalls of a young girl with a set of angel's wings, black and white, an old black and white photograph. And I thought there and then, that looks like one of my paintings. And it looks like one of mine. So I came back, and this wee girl is the daughter of close friends, and I arranged to photograph her. And I started to make these paintings, and this is one of quite a large series of variations on this theme. The initial ones had the wing, then I began to introduce the doves. That's probably quite a difficult story, but the mother of this wee girl, actually, I've known Claire since we were kids, and she eventually came and she said to me, "You know what you're painting here, Gerard, don't you?" And I had to say, "Well, I don't really know." She said, "Well, you're painting Elaine. I lost a sister when she was 13. And she said, "Well, that's what you're painting. That's obviously what you're painting." So somewhere buried deep in my subconscious, I was working something out and making this painting. And on the wall, you can see behind her, and this is probably one of the later pieces where I really understood what I was doing with the image. Inscribed on the wall behind her, you can see it's got the word angel. It's got it as an anagram. I've got it in ancient Hebrew. I've got it in Greek. I think it's Cyrillic. The word malach. So it's basically a mishmash. So what looks like random graffiti isn't. It's all part of the narrative surrounding that wee girl and that whole theme of angel.
Thank you, Gerard. It's a truly beautiful painting. So I think we want to finish on the Doddy story, because I think it's just a fascinating, moving story. And do you think the best way to do it is just to give us a bit of the background, and then Victoria can perhaps tee up a video? And we probably have time to show the full 8 minutes, which is probably the right thing to do it justice, do you think?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh, it's a fairy tale, actually. There's just really no other words for it. As part of what I do as an artist, so the beginning point for this, as part of what I'm doing as an artist, because I do all of this myself, I am constantly trying to get my work out of Scotland, out of the UK, and into new spaces. My experience is that if I can get my paintings into new spaces, the paintings do the job for me. They don't need anything else. But getting them out and getting them into other countries, I need to trust people. I need to make those connections. So I've been working with a wonderful guy called Jim McDonald, the principal of Strathclyde University. Jim and I have been doing some things together, and he was in Hong Kong, and he happened to text me from Hong Kong, and I said, "Look, keep your eye out for any opportunities for an up-and-coming young Scottish artist, not so young Scottish artist." And he texts back to say, "Right, I'm going to introduce you to someone." A guy called Stuart, oh goodness, his second name, beautiful, wonderful guy. He said, if he can't organise this for you, no one can. So I met up with Stuart in a wee cafe just south of Perth before Christmas. He was home to visit the family. He's based over there, been there for nearly 30 years. And he said to me, "What can I do for you?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know. Actually, I'm trying to kind of get the work out of Scotland." He said, "Well, we could organise an exhibition. We could do something through the Chambers of Commerce." He said, I said, "But all of that's quick. Would you put on an exhibition?" I said, "Yes, I would." "Would you come to Hong Kong?" "Yes, I would." And I could see his brain working. And he said, "Actually, would you paint a portrait?" And I said, "Yes, I would." And he said, "Right, there's a big fundraising event taking place in April." Now, this was in December. He's saying, "In April next year, for Doddy Weir. You've heard of Doddy Weir? Of course I had. He said, I think if you painted a portrait of Doddy Weir, we could maybe take it to Hong Kong and we could maybe do something with it. We could maybe raise some funds. So I said, that sounds absolutely brilliant. And actually I could almost, like hairs in the back of my neck, I thought, that's brilliant. That's absolutely, let's do it. So he had to contact the Doddy Weir Foundation to say, look, Gerard Burns is interested in making a portrait. What do you think? And they said, yeah, brilliant. What we're going to do with it? And I was saying, well, look, let's not worry about that. Let's make a portrait. So took a while. Doddy obviously wasn't well even at that point. He had loads going on, so I didn't actually manage to get to him till January. The event's in April. And I went down to meet Doddy, and you know, he's Doddy Weir, he's just magic. And he's saying to me, right, so what are we going to do? I said, I don't know. What do you want to do? You know, and this process I was describing to you, sitting in his kitchen, I had to say, him and his wife, Kathy, so who am I painting? And he's looking at me like, well, what do you mean? I say, well, is it Doddy Weir, the rugby player? Is it Doddy Weir, the father, the farmer? Who am I painting? So they were saying, well, I think this has got to be within the foundation. So I think that's what we've got to do. And what do you want me to wear? And I said, I don't care. You know what I mean? Wear a rugby strip. And again, he said, well, if it's the foundation, I think it's got to be the foundation tartan. And actually, I'm going, brilliant, brilliant, because that's what I was hoping, but I didn't want to lead it. So I took Doddy out, and it was a bitterly cold January day morning in his farm, and I'd been out for a dinner wee scout, the light was really bright, and we found an old byre, one of the sheds, and the light was perfect. Took him out there, and Doddy's one of these guys, and I've learned that his way of coping is to act the clown. He acts the clown to put you at your ease, and that's what he was doing in the initial photos, and all these big goofy shots of big daft smiles and shapes and all that, and I had to say to him, Doddy, look, I'm happy to take whatever you're willing to give me here, but I think this is wrong. I think you're in a serious place. I think this has to be quite a serious portrait. I think this has to show something else other than the guy we all love. It has to say something else. I said, right, so I'm going to lead you, and I don't like to do this, but I'm going to lead you. I want you to put your hands in your pockets, and I want you to look straight to camera. He can't get his hands in his pockets. So Kathy had to come and put his hands in his pockets. And it was amazing. It just took the shine off it completely. And all of a sudden we were in a different place, and so he did it. I said, and it was actually, you could see in his eyes, I said, right, straight to camera. And I got these amazing shots, truly amazing shots. And as soon as I got them, I thought, that's it. As far as I'm concerned, that's it. It was cold. He was getting cold. I was getting cold. So the last 5 minutes of it was a very, very different vibe. Took the photographs back into the house. And the way that I work is I'll say, well, look, right now, while we've done it, let's have a look at these. And again, instantly they said, those are the shots. So then the question is, and again, this all goes to how you put a portrait together. Where is he? Where is he standing? He's not standing in that cowshed for sure. Is it Murrayfields? And they were saying, you know, well, actually, I don't really know. That takes it back to rugby, and it does. And almost out of earshot, Doddy said, wouldn't it be wonderful if we were able to include the Eildons? And I'm thinking, sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings. What is the Eildons? They say, well, if you look out the window, there's those 3 hills, that's the Eildons. That's, since I was a boy, that's where the Melrose, the rugby club, it's underneath the Eildons. And again, I thought, that's just perfect. So I took all of that information, the photos, and I went back to the studio, and I battered together half a dozen Photoshops to let them see how it might look with Murrayfield, but instantly, as soon as I put them against that landscape, it was perfect. Now, there's a bit of a conjuring trick going on there, because with the clown suit, which Doddy would admit, that big suit, that's what it is. That painting, to get that to work in that context, it could have been so wrong. but it works. And I've said this on many occasions, that painting gave me no trouble whatsoever. And if you do a thing for the right reasons, you sometimes get a wee help. And with that painting, for sure, all of the various layers of it, it just worked. So back to nuts and bolts. We're now at the end of February, and the thing is on this 5th of April, I think it was. So from January, so I had 6 weeks to pull this together, and I'm working. And they're saying, how is it? I'm saying, it's great, don't worry. And they're still also saying to me, so what are we going to do with this? What do we do with the thing? I said, right, I've got a plan. We did this with Alex Salmon's portrait. We're going to crowdfund it. We're going to take it over to Hong Kong, and we're going to ask the room to buy it. We're going to ask everybody in the room to contribute to the purchase of this painting. So we're not looking for one person to spend 50 grand. We're going to try and get £1,000 each from 50 people. So they were very nervous about this, and I said, look, you're going to have to this is a leap of faith here. This will work. You're just going to have to trust me. Of course, in the background, I'm thinking, oh, I hope this is going to work. So there's one other wee thing come into the equation on the way to Hong Kong. So I got the painting finished. I had to roll the painting up and take it in a ski bag with a frame, because we didn't have time to ship it. It was that tight. I had to take it on the plane with me, re-stretch it and reassemble a frame over there. It was so tight. They had asked me, really almost a kind of a bit of lateral thinking, they said, look, we know you've painted Billy Connolly's portrait. Would you invite Billy? Do you think he would come? And I had to say, well, look, obviously I know Billy, but I don't know Billy. What I will do is, if you put together an invitation, I'll forward that to him with a covering note to say, this is what I'm doing. Would you be willing to come? This is what they're willing to offer you. So he came. I mean, it was just amazing. It was just amazing. He came to the event, and nobody on the night knew that Billy was going to be there. So you can imagine there was nearly 1,500 people at this event, and as the piper started, you could see them all turning around going, I can't believe my eyes here, do you know? So we're on the night, the painting's completed, and I knew that I'd made something really special. Work had been done in the background by Scott Hastings, and we kind of knew at that point that it was probably going to go into the portrait gallery. Ultimately, that was where it was going to go. So on the night, I had to get up on stage. And actually, it's funny, these things, my teaching background, I don't actually find them that nerve-wracking. But it could have been a disaster. You know, you could have gone up there and said, right, ladies and gents, this is what we're going to do. And nobody does it. But I thought, no, the energy in the room was fantastic. Billy got up and spoke first. And basically, I told the story. And I really said, look, so this painting, I've made something I think quite special here, which touches upon Doddy's stoicism. This man's a hero. What he's doing, what he's done, given what he's living with, this is a truly remarkable individual. And I think this painting reflects that. So I'm going to ask you, and they'd set it at 3 different levels, pledges: diamond pledge, gold and silver. Diamond pledge was £5,000. The next one was down was 2.5, and the next one was £1,000. So anyway, the auctioneer took over. We unveiled the portrait. There was this gasp and people all standing up applauding, but you still haven't made any money. So the auctioneer, I said to him, let people sweat, let them sweat. So he said, okay, so you've heard what we're going to try and do here. You've got an opportunity to be part of something really special. And what we said was, when it goes to the portrait gallery, your name will go with this painting forever. There'll be a plaque put on the back of it, and your name will be associated. So there's a wee bit of kind of a bait in the hook. So he said, is there anybody willing to pledge at the diamond level? And you could hear the scrape of seats, and 12 people stood up. And we thought, wow, we've done it. We've done it. And the final number was, I think, in excess of £150,000, which is just, I mean, from their point of view, they were just like, wow. And the painting did indeed. That came to pass. The painting is now hanging in the Great Hall in the portrait gallery. So it's a fairy tale. It's just the way that from that germ, that seed, you know, that was planted through to raising all that money to the painting now. And basically it's on loan to the portrait gallery, but there's no way that painting will ever come out of there. The response to it has been, so you're getting people who are sports fans going to the portrait gallery to see Doddie's portrait who wouldn't ordinarily. So it's a brilliant one for them. So that's where it is at the moment. And who knows? I mean, there could be a next bit of the story. I don't know, but I'd be amazed if that's not where it stays.
So your kind of love of Doddie and the experience has been fantastic. I'm hoping Victoria's got the video that we can just show so everybody can see the images and the process and Technicolor. Here we go.
Covered. I think we should just leave that on it. This has been coming for a long time. It feels like the fulfilment of a promise. It feels right. I feel we've done right by the people in Hong Kong who contributed to the painting, and I think we've done right by Doddie in this. This is where this painting should be. It's actually a slightly convoluted, like a lot of what I do, it's a slightly complicated story. The story begins, I suppose, with a guy called Jim McDonald. And almost jokingly, I'd said to Jim, he does a lot of travelling, and I'd said to him, look, well, keep your eye out if there's any opportunities for a young up-and-coming Scottish artist, you can let me know. Jim's an amazing guy, so he came straight back to me and said, look, I'm going to introduce you to a guy, a brilliant guy, a guy called Stuart Saunders. And basically Stuart, when he came, he said, so what can I do? What can I do for you? And then it was amazing, I could see his brain working. He said, well, there could be an opportunity. You'll have heard of the rugby player Doddie Weir. There's a big fundraising event in Hong Kong in April. If you would paint a portrait of Doddie, I think maybe we could use the portrait, we could maybe do something. And I thought, that's perfect. We actually got to a point where I said, well, look, what I need to do is, I need to meet Doddie, and I need to take some photographs of Doddie.
Not a lot of hard work for myself. I couldn't believe it. I was expecting me to maybe sit on the sofa with legs crossed. I would normally do portraits. So
I've got loads of shots, goofy shots of big smiles and daft shapes and all sorts of stuff. And I said to Doddie, this is wrong. For me to make a painting from the images I've been getting, it's wrong. I want you to stand straight to camera, look straight into the lens, and I want you to put your hands in your pockets. And that was the shot. So the next question then is, so where is he? Where's he standing? Is he standing at Murrayfield? And again, I'm throwing it open to them. And almost out of earshot, Doddie said to Kathy, wouldn't it be fantastic if we were to use the Eildons? And Kathy said, oh, you can just about see them out of the window. It's a range of hills down at the borders, which mean a lot to Doddie and I. It's really symbolic of this area. And as soon as I placed Doddie in that context, again, I thought, that's it. The image that I had of the Eildons, it was a really bright, quite a sunny day. And again, in terms of the narrative, it felt wrong. So I imposed the dark clouds, Doddie standing, shoulders back, straight to camera. But there's trouble. There are some contradictions in that painting, and actually, given the big tartan suit, almost the clown suit, that painting could have gone in a completely different direction. Being able to place that slightly ridiculous image with the suit against that beautiful, soft borders landscape and have it work the way that it does is quite magical, actually. In order to get the painting over here so that I was able to present it properly, the painting had to be in a frame. To ship the painting framed would have been more expensive than 2 business class flights, so that was out of the question. This should be a solution. Basically, unheard of, we've flat packed a frame. We made a frame up and we carefully took it apart, and all my instincts tell me that this should go back together no problem. And there we have it. Want a peek? Right, that's it, that's enough. I remade the painting, everything went as it should. The frame was back on it. So there's all this energy. You can feel the energy building as the night itself, the big fundraising event itself approaches. Of all of these things, you think you want to try and introduce as much as possible, a wee bit of theatre about the whole thing, and just build it. I mean, this is going to drive people mad as the night goes on, you know, really right up to the moment. So basically a piper comes in and you could see people in the room going, I can't believe my eyes. Billy Connolly, Serene McGeechan, it was remarkable. So you could feel the energy in the room was astonishing, actually, right from the start. They get Doddy up on stage at one point, and he was just, the guy's just a natural comedian.
Well, it's lovely to be here, but this time last year I wasn't sure it would happen. So on the back of that, it's gave me and all these lovely messages as well, so I must admit Alex Ferguson's got a lovely house.
He was brilliant. Scott said a few words. They started the auction, and then we came to this point. So I had to get up on the stage and explain to this room of 1,000 people what I had made, why I had made it, and what we were proposing to do. So I had to say to them, we're going to invite you, every single one of you, to buy this painting. If you're willing to contribute, your name will go with this painting forever. You could have heard a pin drop. Right, as we got to the finale, and Johnny the auctioneer, and I'm saying, I think maybe we should let people see the portrait. You could hear this gasp in the room.
The unveiling at Hong Kong was just the most amazing event in the world. We're on stage all together, and he showed me the portrait, and I brought tears in my eyes.
Johnny then took the mic and he said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, you know what we're going to try and do here tonight. Are we going to do this? So they broke it down and they said, look, we're going to try and do this in levels of pledge. There's a diamond pledge, which I think was about £5,000. There's 2 or 3 layers to it. So, and there was a big pause as he said, so is there anyone in the room who's willing to pledge at the diamond level? You could hear the scuffle of seats, and there was maybe 15 or 20 people stood up, and we thought, we've done it. The Hong Kong element of the whole thing couldn't possibly have, in retrospect, couldn't possibly have gone any better than it did. I'm not sure what the grand total was. I think it was maybe around about £100,000, I'm not sure. But certainly a remarkable number.
I think that's all Victoria's Christmas music. Anyway, thank you, Gerard. I mean, what a great story, an absolutely stunning image, and a great tribute to a true giant of a man. It's really moving. And a great way, I think, to finish the evening. So I would just like to say we've got a few thumbs up kicking around. I can't see them all, but thank you all. I hope everybody's enjoyed it. Thank you all for joining. Let us know afterwards if you enjoyed this kind of thing. It's a, it's a new venture for us, but we'd like to do this kind of thing again if you enjoy it. I've had a fabulous evening. We did wonder, Gerard, if we could fill the 2 hours or if we'd have to cut it early. And we've been here for 2 hours, so hopefully people have enjoyed it. And yeah, thanks for your fascinating insight, for your time. I think it's been tremendous, and hopefully people will be able to come and visit Fairhill and come along and meet you. We've got a few thank yous coming in on the chat.
Thank you. It's been
Any
an
last
absolute
words?
pleasure. No, just, yeah, anytime. The Burns family is multifaceted, so we could actually probably just about do your music night if you run out of ideas. Anyway, it's been a pleasure. Absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Lots of great comments coming in through the chat, so appreciate all of that from everyone. And I think I'll just wind it up and say thanks again, and stay safe, and hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.